What is up, everyone, and welcome back to episode 6 of From the Interns. We are back today with a pretty big announcement. We've got something going on with Onward Reserve where we are going to be giving away 3 polos for 500 subscribers. So shout out to TJ and everyone over there. We absolutely love Onward and are super excited to partner with them. But with that being said, we're going to get into just Kentucky analysis, Auburn game, big week of college football last weekend, and what do you got?
Yeah, Georgia was able to take care of business with a pretty comfortable win. I think anytime you're playing an SEC team and you can kind of take a little bit of a deep breath when you're in the stands at Stanford Stadium is pretty nice. Yeah, it was a good win. I think the offense looked pretty good. I thought Bobo called a pretty good game, and the defense had its struggles a little bit in the pass game. Relatively, there were some screen passes that Kentucky had that I thought broke away for a little bit, but I mean, at the end of the day, as long as the team you're playing isn't putting points on the board, which Georgia did a really good job of doing, I thought they did what they needed to do. I mean, a little bit of a rest game maybe, especially with this Auburn game coming up. So I was pretty satisfied as a Georgia fan watching that one.
Yeah, it was interesting to see Gunner got pulled with about a minute left in the third quarter. So, I feel like you always sort of think you're expecting that to happen when you have a lead like that. But honestly, I was thinking it was going to be a little bit later into the fourth quarter. Had a few injuries there, a few minor ding-ups. Nate Frazier went out for a little bit. Sort of looked like he had a stinger. He was fine. Monroe Freeling's dealing with an ankle. Kirby said today he's going to be not really doing anything today, but they're hopeful to get him back for Auburn. But other than that, Ernest Green is still working to recover. And Georgia stayed relatively healthy through this game for the most part, which is about all you can ask for. And one of the last games that, you can look out from an outside perspective and be like, Georgia is 100% going to win that game. Yep. And, from here on out, you've got Charlotte, and that's it for that category, especially when you're playing lesser, SEC teams, let's not clip this, but lesser
Right.
SEC teams in Auburn and Mississippi State on the road. The fact that those games are on the road and they're so big is definitely something to cause some concern.
Yeah, but one thing I think when you're talking about rest, Auburn had a bye week, so I feel like you're not really trying to keep up with the other team you're playing, but Auburn had a bye. They're going to be a little bit more rested, so I think maybe pulling Gunner a little early might have been because of, Auburn is going to be a little bit more well-rested, so let's kind of stay where we're at. But also, one thing I've liked about Kirby Smart, relatively, he doesn't lose to the teams he shouldn't, and I think that's a big thing because Kentucky hasn't beaten Georgia since 2009, and that continued again this year, and it just shows that Georgia, they'll have their bad games and they won't maybe not look great, but they're not losing. And we're going to get into it later across football, but there's a lot of teams that they can't say the same. If they play a bad game, they're going to end up losing, and there's a lot of examples of that we'll get into a little bit later. But yeah, and it really just showed, Georgia had a couple options with this game. They could have, all feel sorry for us. We lost to Alabama again. We're just going to kind of take the route of, the season's over, whatever, but they came out ready to play. They were firing on all cylinders for the most part, and they're not going to let that loss to Alabama define their season. So
Absolutely not. And I think one thing that stood out to me, one of my buddies, shout out Matthew, sent me on a different Matthew, sent me on Saturday morning. I guess it was mentioned on game day how Georgia had not led at halftime of a Power 4 game in the past 8 Power 4 games they had played. So that streak obviously came to a close on Saturday, but I think that's just something that's sort of fascinating when you think about all of the talent that Georgia has. Honestly, this year it's kind of surprising, but just looking at that and hearing that stat sort of definitely stood out.
Yeah.
You've got Alabama no lead there, Tennessee on the road, obviously win that game. It's just crazy to look back and think that has happened for 8 straight, Power 4 games. And I think it's definitely a big thing that came to a close here. Even though it's Kentucky, we look at Kentucky last year and it was a 13 to 12 point game. And like you said, in the SEC, it's always good to see that Kirby is taking care of those teams that he is supposed to, and that's been historically the truth under Kirby Smart for just about every team except for Alabama. So
Yeah, and it's almost rare to see Georgia win an SEC game by a significant margin. I mean, it seems like every time there's an SEC opponent that Georgia plays, no matter what level, it's relatively close. I remember a couple of years ago, I think it was one of the Natty seasons. I think Georgia went up to Vandy, and it was a pretty close game. So it's just stuff like that. And even last time we went up to Kentucky, it was a one-score game. So it was just good to see Georgia just kind of put a beat down on an SEC team that was, I mean, Kentucky, not what you're saying, they're a lesser SEC opponent. That is true. But it's just good to see Georgia come out, play well, and just, not really give fans that much to complain about, I think was something that is good to see.
And you've obviously got a noon kickoff. It's a little dead in the stadium, but it felt like the energy was there for those that were there for the most part. I was going somewhere with this, but just the energy was there. It's a big win to build off of for sure, especially in something that it can be such a trap, and just to have any sort of escape free with no injuries and that sort of thing is definitely a big idea. I know where I was going with this. So we obviously got to see Ryan Puglisi. He made a lot of very impressive throws where you see him spin it and you're like, dang, he can just absolutely rip that thing. He did have a pretty rough interception there. Just, I don't know if it was a miscue with the receiver or just an overthrown ball, but definitely a rough interception there. But he absolutely can spin it. If he can, that's sort of what Kirby had referenced when talking about him in the past, is just his decision making needs to be worked on. He clearly can fit balls into tight windows, but I think with time it's going to be interesting to see him continue to develop within the offense.
Yeah. I mean, Kentucky pretty much took care of business. That's kind of about all I've got for the Kentucky game. I think most of the focus will be, it was just a crazy week across football. And so with that, we're going to get into this segment, which is brought to you by Jimmy James Towing. Jimmy James Towing covers all of Georgia. If you ever get locked out, have a flat, need a jump, breakdown, or just need a hand with your car, Jimmy James Towing will be there for you. He'll tow your vehicle to a repair shop of your choice 24/7. So remember Jimmy James Towing for all your vehicle needs. Call 404-554-3121 and follow them on Facebook at Jimmy James Towing, and I'll put all this information in the comments below. So, yeah, just to get into that, Florida with the upset of Texas, that was, wow.
I'm just going to go ahead and say, I know we're not in the lock segment yet. That was one of my picks last week, was Texas to just, take that game away and cover. And, I'm now 0-8 in those picks, so just wait until that section and fade me to make all of the money in the world if you're interested. But, it's incredible how Florida's able to win that game. Both of the top the number one and number two teams in the preseason poll are not even ranked anymore, which I think is just absolutely absurd.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've always, especially with the way the college football is now, when the first rankings come out, you're kind of like, oh, it doesn't really matter. But then when something like that happens, it's like, were they severely overrated, or were they supposed to? I don't know. It's a tough way to call those games. But I was a little surprised for Texas to go unranked, especially when you consider Notre Dame, when they started out 0-2 and stayed ranked. I thought that was a little harsh. But, if you want to be ranked, you got to look good. And I really have not been impressed by Texas all year.
And it honestly kind of sucks for Georgia fans, because you look at that game at the beginning of the season and you're thinking that's a premier matchup. That's going to be a night game, no doubt. And then you look at it now and it's like, this game still means a lot because Texas is still Texas, but dang, they're not going to be ranked nearly as high as we thought they were. We thought this was going to be a top 5 matchup heading into the season.
And now Ole Miss will probably be the highest ranked team we play all year, which if you'd have told me that, I never would have believed that.
Yeah, and they announced that was a 3:30 kickoff today. So
Sunbelt Billy down there, I guess he's still it's just insane.
I have seen my my buddy that was talking about, Matthew, he goes to Florida, and he, I think, was more upset than happy about this win just because he knows the implications it means for Billy Napier and his,
They're gonna keep
bringing
him back.
And he literally just wins just enough games like this in order to keep his job, which, I'm always hesitant to be like, oh, let's fire this guy, because what are you running to? Are you running from something, or are you running to something? And so you never know. Florida's looked into Lane Kiffin, guys like that. But with what he's doing at Ole Miss, I don't know why he would leave at this point.
Yeah.
But it's just funny to see that sort of thing. And Florida, of course, wins that game. They're gonna have talent in the state of Florida as long as they have a decent recruiter to be able to put up upsets like that. And at the end of the day, they're only 6.5-point underdogs.
Right.
So Vegas knew it was at least going to be a relatively close game.
I mean, you talk about hot seat. Do you think Sarkisian maybe is getting a little warm? I mean, that's rough.
You would think so.
They finished 8-4 this year. That's
you lose the SEC championship last year against Georgia.
Can't win a big game.
You really, like you said, you tend to not be able to win the big game. And when you've got donors like Texas has, I'm sure the buyout is not that tall of a task if he does start to warm up that seat. And obviously, they still had a great season last year, but
they can still have a good season this year. I think
he's sort of sitting in a lukewarm bath right now, and the temperature could be rising for sure.
And I mean, we talk about can't win the big game. We got Penn State. I mean,
oh my gosh,
losing to UCLA. That's probably that game reminded me a lot of when Purdue beat Ohio State a couple years ago. It's like they were probably 4 touchdown underdogs and won.
Yeah, we were talking about last week when we recorded this, we were talking about how they can't seem to win the big game when they barely lose to Oregon in double overtime. And then now you're sitting here talking about a team that lost to 0-4 UCLA with an interim head coach. Their offensive coordinator
calling their plays or
he's just 11 years ago was getting carried off the field after winning a big game as a quarterback. And crazy. I mean, Nico, all props to him, honestly, here. He had every right. When their coach was fired, you have a 30-day window where you can put your name in the portal and you can just abandon ship. But it sounds like everyone is all for him. It sounds like he's really brought a culture of guys bringing them together through the coach's firing and bringing them to think that they can win games like this, which without that, you're never going to win a single game like this. So, I mean, they tried to make it close. Penn State almost came back, but the fact that UCLA, I remember pulling up my phone, and I think it's 24-7 or something like that, and I'm just blown away because talk about hot seat again.
It would genuinely blow my mind if Franklin's still there next year. Like, if they still bring him back after this, and they've still got some tougher Big Ten games. I think they play Ohio State too. So, I mean, their playoff hopes are most likely zero, and
they're dwindling.
I mean, props to him, I guess, for bringing their program to a top national level year in, year out somewhat, but it would really surprise me if he was still the head coach at Penn State after this year. But and then with that, Miami, I mean, rolls over FSU, I put that, but the final score was a little bit closer than what it should have been because, I mean, Mario Cristobal's end of game play calling and decision making, as we've seen when Georgia Tech defeated Miami a couple years ago in a comeback win, is always pretty questionable. But
I mean, Carson Beck looked incredible throughout this game. 4 passing touchdowns, 240 yards. Did everything he needed to do. Like you said, the coaching decisions sort of left some questions just because, I mean, Miami had control of that game pretty much all the way through until the last 5 minutes when Castellanos is just making great plays. And, I mean, I'm at the point right now where I think this is the most complete team in football. I think they're the number one team above quite far, honestly not too far above every other team. But I do think Miami's number one. And we were talking about the other day, I seriously think Cristobal could be the reason that this team, doesn't win it all.
I texted him at the end of that game. I said, I think the one thing that would hold them back is him and his decision making because, I mean, they were up by so many points, and they were just throwing the ball, just kind of jogging around the field. Defense is playing light, and the next thing you know, Florida State's an onside kick away from getting the ball back and scoring in either OT or winning the game. I mean, it's just stuff like that. Like that, if you give a better team, not that Florida State's bad, but if you give a better team a couple shots like that, it may not turn out the way you want it to. So.
And then I think that's about it for across college football. One more thing, forgot to do pizza segment, pizza performance of the week. And so, I'm sorry if you've been waiting for that. Here we go. I know you've probably been, twiddling your thumbs waiting at the thought of what pizza it's going to be. So this one's a little tricky to me just because it's a huge SEC when marginally you don't really, Georgia covered the spread. They won the game by, how much they're expected to win the game. But for some reason, it felt a little underwhelming at times. Like you said, giving up those screen passes. Kentucky's quarterback had over 200 yards, and, it just has not played to that level throughout any other game. So I'm sort of leaning towards a bacon and sausage pizza. It's like it doesn't really match too well together. It can be a little underwhelming. You put it in the oven a little bit too long, just enough to where on each slice you have about 2 bites where you're like, dang, this pizza's kind of charred. And that's where you get the Gunner pick, the Puglisi pick. Those are those charred bites. So, it's a good pizza, doesn't fully satisfy, but you're full. You're glad to have eaten it, and it's fully cooked for sure, and you're happy about that. So that's pizza of the week.
I think a couple of weeks ago we did the pizza player of the week, and I think it was Lagway, and he threw a few picks. If we had to do a pizza player of the week, I think it's got to be Arch Manning.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you go from Heisman favorite, you're on the number 1 team at the beginning of the year, and now you've got 2 losses under your belt when you play teams that aren't Sam Houston State. So yeah, I mean, all that hype that he maybe one of the most overrated starting. I mean, it's just, I'm not saying he's a backcourt. That's not what I'm saying, but just for what he was supposed to be, according to some of the people out there in the college football world, it's been very, very underwhelming, I think, to say the least.
It's just super weird because he just looks different than he did last year. Yeah. He obviously gained all of this hype. His last name's Manning, so that doesn't help. And I honestly sort of just feel bad for him in that aspect of it. Like, the amount of pressure on this guy.
There were a lot of throws he forced.
Insane,
all those interceptions, he's just throwing it deep in a double cut. It's just forced.
And so,
we'll see what happens with him.
I think it's interesting. I think he's not going to be winning the Heisman Trophy. I don't think he's going to be going to New York. But it'll be interesting to see. I mean, now when you have that sort of outlook all last offseason, he's a junior. He could go. I don't know if he redshirted or not. But he talked about, I guess, his uncle or Grandpa Archie mentioned he was going to be staying one more year at Texas. Arch, before the season, said that he hadn't decided yet. So now you're probably leaning towards returning for at least one more year.
For sure.
So that's really just an interesting sort of thing to follow in the development of that. But with that being said, we're going to go on into our Auburn analysis. We'll both be going down Thursday and Friday to the old warplanes. It's a terrifying scene just because, if you remember correctly, the last time Georgia played a night game in Jordan-Hare was the prayer at Jordan-Hare, where there's the infamous 4th and 18 Hail Mary to win the game.
It's been that long since a night game.
That's what I read
That's
somewhere
crazy.
today.
I guess a lot of 3:30s back when like CBS SEC was a big prime time, but that's actually crazy to think about.
Yeah.
Wow, I hadn't thought about that.
So don't fully quote me on that, but that's what I read earlier today. And it's just terrifying to think about because the amount of dark magic that exists in that stadium is very visible. Last time we played there 2 seasons ago, it was literally Brock Bowers single-handedly won Georgia that game. And they had a lead going into halftime, and Georgia had Brock Bowers and the rest of the team around him and was able to make the comeback. But all of that being said, the scariest piece of information I found out on Sunday morning was that Auburn is retiring Cam Newton's jersey before this game on Saturday. So if you think that place was already buzzing, it's going to be even crazier. Cam Newton, obviously everyone at Auburn loves him, and that place it's just going to be rocking.
Yeah, and my biggest note that I've got on this is, look, Auburn is better than their record shows, and they've lost 2 games. I think Kirby said this earlier in his presser. I saw a video on Instagram, but he was like, they've lost to 2 really good teams on the road. 2 of the best teams in the SEC on the road are their only 2 losses. They beat Baylor on the road in their first game of the year, which they're a decent Big 12 team. Mm-hmm. So this Auburn team is, I mean, they may have 2 losses, and you might say, oh, well, Georgia should easily win that game. But all the things he was talking about on the road, this is going to be a extremely, extremely good football game. So
it is. And they've got 2 really premier offensive guys, Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton.
Yep. Singleton
we've seen play back when he was at Georgia Tech. We saw him do decent things against Georgia. We know Dalen Everett was talking about today those 2 guys and said specifically, you know, Singleton's the shifty guy, Cam Coleman's the 50-50 ball guy. And I just want to take a second to give props to Dalen Everett. There's a trend with Georgia defensive backs where it's you get targeted on for the first 2 years of playing at Georgia, and then something happens where you become that guy. And Dalen Everett, you know, was a guy that people in the fan base were like, you know, honestly, occasionally dogging on. And you look at that now, and he's become the guy that isn't really getting thrown against. He's not getting targeted at, and he's been just playing incredible football. Kirby talked about him tackling well this season. And so it's been a trend with that. Kamari was the same thing. Keely Ringo was a similar thing. And, yeah, this offense is just very dynamic in the fact that Jackson Arnold is practically a running back.
I'm a little bit worried about what he can do running, especially when you look at all of Georgia's games this year, and getting pressure on the quarterback is just non-existent. There's a very decent chance that he has a field day against Georgia's defense. That may be a little bit of a hot take, because I think Georgia they'll scout and they'll do the things they need to do to not let that happen as much as you would think. But I mean, he has the capability to just get out of the pocket, take off for big gains, and he's not just a guy that's going to slide. He's going to lower his shoulder. He's going to take some hits, and he's not going to let this Georgia defense scare him one bit, I don't think. I think, you know, if he goes back and looks at some of the games Georgia's played, I mean, Ty Simpson just sat back there all day and found these playmakers. And those receivers he was talking about, those guys can make big plays. And if you let Jackson Arnold just sit in the pocket all day and find receivers that can get open, even if they're not open, he's just eventually going to take off. So that's my biggest concern when I see Auburn is, and they also have a really good defense, because when they lost to Oklahoma and A&M, it was both very low-scoring games on the road. So, I mean, they can be pretty good in very different areas if you let them. So that's going to be a little bit concerning as we watch this game unfold this weekend.
Yeah, with Arnold, it's something that sort of over the past 2 seasons especially, Georgia has made it to where these sort of run-heavy quarterbacks look incredible against Georgia's defense. Think about Milroe is a highlight. Yeah. Haynes King, guys like that, Georgia finds a way, you know, recently – since losing guys like Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter, where they just haven't been able to get as much pressure with their front seven. And so that's always sort of a scary thing to look at. I think C.J. Allen was spying some this past game and looked really good off the ball. He was playing very well. But I think just in general, that pass protection and pass rush, I guess, has been pretty lackluster.
Yeah.
And then when you look on the other side of things, Auburn has had 16 sacks this season, which that got mentioned at the presser today. I had no idea the number was that high. There are Kirby talked about their edge rushers are their premier guys on defense and how they've been playing very well, but just the, you know, physicality of the team as a whole. And I think that's definitely something to look out for as a Georgia fan, just because of how banged up the offensive line has been. You might be without your left tackle. You're without your start of the season right tackle. 2 true freshmen on the road again. But with that being said, they've already played in one of these sort of environments in Neyland, which is arguably more loud, maybe not as intense just because of the night game in Auburn. But it's a lot to look out for. I think it was hilarious. Chauncey Bowens was talking about how he referenced when talking about the crowd noise, he was talking about College Football 26, the video game, and he talked about the stadium pulse and how I don't even know where he was going with it, but I heard that and my ears perked up. And I just think that's hilarious because all these guys sort of make those references. They understand, obviously, the outside noise, but at the end of the day, they sort of lock in when it's game time. So I really
wonder if Auburn has the stadium pulse thing in the corner of their end zone like Tennessee does.
Walking really into Neyland and seeing that that actually blew my mind. At Neyland Stadium, they have a little stadium pulse meter on the sideline, and it literally feels like you're in a video game. But, I mean, I think that's about it just for overall aspect.
But one more thing I was thinking about just when you think about running quarterbacks, like I was sitting there thinking about the next Georgia games. I feel like every game we play for the most part of the rest of the year is going to have a running quarterback. Because Ole Miss, Florida, Texas, maybe Mississippi State, I don't really know much about their quarterback. Georgia Tech, sure, I mean, all these teams. Yeah. So, I mean, Georgia's going to be tested over and over and over again, and that's going to continue to be the talk is can they get pressure on the quarterback. So it's just, I mean, it's going to be another test to see if they can get it done. And it is obviously it's they can still win the game without it, but it's not going to help if Jackson Arnold is running all over the place. So with that, I mean, we just get into locks, I guess.
All right, welcome back to Unlocked. Like I said earlier, I'm 0-8, so I would go ahead and mute your headset while you're listening to me speak about this section. But I'll go ahead and get it out of the way. I've got Alabama covering over Missouri. Haven't really had the time to watch too much Missouri football, but I know one thing about Alabama, and that it's that they win games, that they're a very talented team, that Ty Simpson is one of the best quarterbacks in college football, gets rid of it quick, makes the right reads. Give me Alabama -2.5. And then, going over to South Carolina and LSU, I've got South Carolina covering the 10-point spread over LSU. This actually, when I wrote it down, was 8.5 this morning, but then I checked again and it's already shifted. I really just like Beamer and don't know if I fully trust what Brian Kelly is doing within that team. I think that, with Sellers being there, seriously anything can happen in this game. I think it's a little bit more of a coin flip than a 10-point spread. I like a one-score game, so hopefully one of those two hits. Hopefully I can make my first correct pick of the season, but let's hear Matthew, who actually gets them right sometimes.
I've had a little bit more luck, not as much. It's been rough lately. I got off to a way too hot of a start. I like Oklahoma +3 over Texas. Oklahoma's defense is really, really, really good, as we've seen if you've watched any Oklahoma football. And, with a really good defense and Texas just does not look good, I think Oklahoma +3 is safe. And if I think they're probably going to win outright also.
I love that
in the Red River rivalry now, not shootout anymore.
Yep.
And then I think Tennessee -13 over Arkansas. Tennessee coming off a bye week at home, it's one of those games. Arkansas, they're all over the place. They just fired Pittman. I don't really know if they know too much of what they're doing. And Tennessee can put up a lot of points, and I just don't know if Arkansas can keep up. So I think Tennessee -13 at home in a little afternoon SEC kickoff is pretty safe. So.
That's about going to wrap up episode 6 of From the Interns. Make sure to follow our socials. We'll be posting a lot this weekend as we're over in Auburn, Alabama. Wish us luck as we make that drive. Not too bad. But I guess one more thing. Make sure to comment your Instagram handle to get a chance at winning one of those Onward Reserve polos when we hit 500 subscribers. And don't forget to check out Jimmy James Towing. Yep.
And again, I'm going to put the comment or the advertising stuff in the comments. So check that out if you ever need anything from him. So, I'm really looking forward to this game. Just one last thought. I mean, it's going to be, like I said, it's going to be a really good game. So, and there's a lot of good games this week. Like I was saying, Texas, Oklahoma, that's going to be a good one. So, and then the Bama, Missouri game in the morning. So there's a lot of good, just like usual, a lot of good SEC football to watch. So it's a good day to be on the couch just hanging out. Or if you're going to Auburn, just travel safe and cheer on the dogs. So see how it goes.
We will see y'all there if you're there, and we'll see you on your couch if you're not there. I guess that about does it. Y'all have a good one.
Yep.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs.